Barr.
Roseanne Barr.
So comedy legend. The reason I bring her up is, aside from the white woman segue, she recently lost her mind, and her thing would be very similar to, I guess, our complaints right now. In generally, complaints from comedians about being censored and things like that. But she's an example of somebody who takes it way beyond the acceptable boundaries, right? So when people complain about comedians who say weird things or who are, perpetuating oppression, etc., they really are talking about people like Roseanne. And then by proximity, a lot of other people get involved because you're like, oh, well, you said a horrible thing. You must mean it because that one exception to the rule meant it, right? Most comedians, I would say, are comedians first, and they like you're contrarian. You like to poke a little, you like to poke people and all that. But I don't think 99% of comics believe the things they're saying. They're just saying it's this impulse. I want to make you a joke. I want to make you laugh. I want to be a little bad. You know what I mean? But Roseanne, she used that to get a show.
Yes.
So she used that even when she had this season 1 of the show, she was pretty bad. Like her tweets are fucking horrible. Yeah. I read it and I'm like, okay, so you're a racist. I'm sorry. Yeah. But she still got a season out of it. And that is a complaint from a lot of people, like on the left, is that you can be a horrible person. You can be the most vile, just racist piece of garbage, the way Roseanne has become recently, and you can still have the #1 rated show on ABC for a full year, right? So that is where the backlash comes from, is like people do get rewarded, right? People do get rewarded for being pieces of shit because it is monetizable right now.
Yeah.
Where you guys come in, and myself not so much. Again, I almost never get any heat on the jokes that I hear that you guys do on Your Hood's a Joke, right? It's usually the comedians who get in trouble. So like, what do you think? Was this a free speech thing, or was she an asshole with her?
Oh, so I know Roseanne Barr from only 2 things, right? I saw her on Green Room with Paul Provenza. That was one of the programs.
That's one of the best episodes of that show.
Yes, so I know her from that, and I know her from Norm Macdonald Live. And what I can tell you is she's a provocateur. Like, she likes doing those things. Because you've seen that episode of Green Room, right?
Yeah.
There's a photo of her dressed up as a Hitler.
Hitler. It's her, Bob Saget,
Patrice
O'Neill.
Yes, and
Bill
Burr.
Bill Burr.
Yes, that was one of the greatest episodes.
So good.
She's dressed up as Hitler, and she's baked a bunch of half-burnt cookies, right?
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, so you see that, and it's like a 10-year-old clip. So that's her thing. She likes doing that.
See?
That's the reason she got... And I really like to believe, and that's the reason she got a season is because she's behaving that way. Not because, because she's a bit of a rebel right now.
That's what I'm saying, is that with dark comedy, there is a line at which point when you cross it, people stop believing that it was just comedy.
Exactly, like the whole
the audience thing.
To not. I know we're talking about this, but to jump to another one, like Gilbert Gottfried getting fired from Aflac during his tweets about the Japanese tsunami.
What did he say? I don't even.
They were just shitty tweets of like they were not funny, but it's Gilbert Gottfried. He was saying I was asking my Japanese friend, does this area I'm moving into have any schools? And they were like, wait a bit, and one will float by. Or like there's a bunch of women in the sea, or I just got dumped, but my Japanese friend said, don't worry, one will float by soon. Like just stuff like really insensitive stuff. Yeah. But he says that shit, but because of at that moment, at that time, then they went, you are that person. And that's with Roseanne too.
That's what I mean, is that is the danger of dark comedy. It's
a roll of the dice. It's like winning, and then all of a sudden you're broke.
Well, that's what I mean. There is a responsibility for the comedian to understand that if you want to go dark, you have to bring more skill into it, right? Yeah. It is at one point a failure on the part of the artist if they can't tell their audience what they're doing. Yeah. Right? So
but at the same time,
there are some people who will react no matter what, right? And it's up to us to be like, all right, well, that is 5% of, the general public. They don't matter. They're extremists. There's extremists in every camp. There's extremists on the right, left, up, down, whatever you want to call it, right? But if you're doing dark comedy, you are intentionally going into dangerous ground, and now you're really
and you have to be smart enough as well.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
I completely agree with that. Yeah,
that's where I'm like, if I can't tell the difference between your jokes and your opinions, it becomes a real problem because of Twitter, we now know what people think.
Yeah, but then at the same time, this is what's really fucked up for me is so many people are like, yeah, get fired, stop that show, this and that. I'm like, she's a comedian. Mm-hmm. The president gets to say the most fucked up shit ever, and he's not a comedian, and he doesn't get fired.
Well, exactly.
It's a way that people are getting their rocks off by firing somebody
who's
not at She doesn't control the country. She doesn't make
Fighting her doesn't
policy.
make any
She doesn't
difference,
bomb anything.
No,
she
no,
just
no.
makes a fucking TV show.
Yeah, but that's where she has responsibility, right? Because she has a TV show and she not supports but represents, or in her own words, she represents a part of the country that is not represented in the media, right? So she has made herself a representative. So with that comes responsibility. With that comes a lot of other things. But also, if she is, and people agree, she does represent a certain section of the public, that means that what the things she says are acceptable to her fans. And if she keeps pushing the envelope, and now the thing she got fired for was comparing a black woman to an ape.
Yeah.
That is a very historic, like
Racist.
very old school racist
And I
move,
think
right?
she knew what she was
Of
doing.
course, she did the same
She's
thing.
not dumb.
Yeah,
She did the
she's not
same
dumb,
thing
yeah.
in 2013.
She's crazy, but she's not dumb.
She did the exact same thing in 2013, and she had to apologize because, fuck, that's just a red line, right? So it seemed to me that she was testing to see where the line was again.
Probably,
You know what I mean? And at some point, I personally have to be like, you know what, Roseanne? You were joking, but having seen the context of your entire timeline, seeing the things, the kind of positions you take.
Oh, totally. That's where it becomes a little different.
Yeah, and then
It's not like the Gilbert Gottfried one where you're like, no, you just were doing
he's
crazy
being a
jokes.
shit, like not my favorite jokes, but whatever.
Yeah.
But I have a hard time believing that he is a
No,
vile
exactly.
person.
He's not.
But with Roseanne, not only does she have the comedy cred and the TV show, but she has fans who listen to her who now think, oh, she said that, now we're gonna go around
she has
calling people apes. So there is a responsibility on people who have that much
But
stature.
then,
Sure, go ahead.
I just need to use the washroom real quick.
We'll keep going. No worries.
but with that, it's kind of the same thing, and I'm not trying to play devil's advocate. And people they label me that sometimes.
Yeah.
Just when I have an argument. They're like, oh, you're playing devil's advocate. I'm like, no, I'm not. You're just not thinking about this part of it. So it's the same kind of thing of, so why do these adults that listen to her and say those things after, why the fuck is she in charge of that?
But she isn't.
But that's why we're judging.
But this is just
So it's like,
But this is just human behavior, right?
Totally. But it's like the same thing when parents, Judas Priest, the album they put out, those two kids killed themselves or whatever, and then people were like, that's because of your music. It's like, we put out music. It's not our fucking responsibility of what people do. And it's a different argument because that was just a song and they put out. But in the song, they're talking about like,
Well, because in a song, you can say that is part of our artistic output, right?
But now we live in a different time.
No, exactly. But when Roseanne tweets, she's not tweeting her show. She's tweeting her thoughts.
I know.
Right?
And that's
So
where
it's
Twitter is a new beast.
Exactly. So for me, when I see that, and I'm like, you know what? I'm glad for Twitter because it gives me so much more context for a human being, and it is easier to identify who's just joking and who probably kind of means it, right? So a good example for me would be somebody like Anthony Jeselnik versus Roseanne Barr.
Oh, yeah. Because
Okay.
Anthony Jeselnik is not.
And he also, I think, wrote a bunch of jokes for her roast a few years ago on Comedy Central. That was before he was famous, right? So I know that she seems to think that maybe they have a similar kind of writing style or whatever. But Anthony Jeselnik, if you see the things he says when he's not performing, he's like the quietest, seems like a regular kind of guy. And I can then kind of almost overlook, because he says some really dark shit. That's his whole game, right? But again, a lot of people give him a pass because nobody really believes that Jeselnik believes the things he says when he's on stage. His Twitter isn't like that. In fact, he doesn't really have much of a social media presence, right? Whatever he does is very banal. So you're like, okay, he's not a political guy. He's a contrarian guy. With Roseanne, it becomes very evident if you look at her non-jokey tweets, just the things she believes. Is like, all right, this person has she's gotten too old. It's like that Bill Burr bit. It's like you can get too old for the world.
Totally. And that is not. I guess the thing is, we want to live in a time where we think we're gonna fix it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's like silencing these fucks doesn't help.
No.
I want to know
what
these
do you think
people
about
are
it?
fucking thinking and saying. So taking away her show and taking all this, that doesn't help us know what these fucking people think.
No, but the thing is, we don't really need to know anymore.
But then at the same time,
we know it.
That show gets canceled. At least it was a well-written, good show. Delete
Fucking
18 other.
I think we got a clip from Russell with. Is that the Paul Provenza one? Yeah. Yeah, actually, let's play a little clip from Roseanne.
This one is actually a great.
Jump in, Roseanne. I don't know. I hate hope.
Oh, it's not Gilbert.
Hope is fucking bullshit. And really, I think anything that takes you out of reality or like fucking dealing with reality is just bullshit. And there
And if
for a
there's
reason.
anybody who knows, it's you.
What, reality? I have my own reality. It's like stark. I don't really search for a lot of meaning or fucking whatever.
That's an interesting thing you're about to say.
I think that maybe it's for women that it's dangerous to have anything but a right-wing opinion.
Speaking of women taking risks,
Okay.
Yeah, I got in a little bit of trouble for that.
when all this stuff happened.
So yeah, so there's Roseanne just in that clip says something interesting. She says it's dangerous for women to have anything but to have anything other than it's dangerous for women to have a right-wing opinion. Basically, sorry. I mean, it is pretty controversial in mainstream media in general to have like conservative right-wing opinions on things. So that's the thing. It becomes so difficult when you hear her be so lucid and be so articulate about something.
Yeah,
right?
and then she's on the other hand. She's
On the other hand, like I personally have no doubt that Roseanne has lost her mind. Like
She lost her mind
years
ago.
ago.
She admits it. She's
No,
crazy.
no,
she's
but
like bipolar.
Yeah.
And she's got all this
she went
crazy
to a
shit.
mental institution.
Yeah,
as
But
well,
I
yeah.
also have no doubt in my mind that I think she does believe a lot of these things. She says, like, she retweets a lot of weird conspiracy stuff.
Oh,
she
for
was
sure.
hard. She was so on Hillary Clinton for running a debunked myth. She kept pressing that Hillary is running this pedophile ring out of a pizza place. Comet Pizza, Pizzagate.
yes,
You know what
yes,
happens
yeah.
at Comet Pizza is couple times a month they have this weird comedy show, this kind of sketch comedy show where the people involved, they dress up as the Illuminati and they make fake Illuminati rituals. Guaranteed at some point in the last few years, some guy walked in,
Yeah,
Saw that. and
saw
went-
that, he's like, oh
that
my God, there's some this left-wing Jews in the
And I
media.
think Hillary's running it.
And Hillary's running this pedophile thing supported by George Soros and blah, and it just goes off and off. You know what I mean? So that part, yeah, it is, and there are very large segments of the population that do believe it. And whether we like it or not, if you're in entertainment in the public eye, when you reach a certain level, your word becomes, for people who don't know any better, almost your word becomes almost like the law. This person said it. We're not talking about like it sucks to say this, but some people are just a little dumber than others.
Oh, 100%. But that's where I kind of go, I don't think that's on the person, and it should be on
when you
those.
know it, because Roseanne does make a big show about how much influence she has and how she's helping retweet this person and that person.
Yeah.
So she is aware of it, right?
But
and
at the same time, I feel sometimes, especially even me, right? We don't make the difference between the character on stage and off stage, right? Like my favorite series is Eastbound and Down. Have you guys seen
I've
that
seen
series?
it. I have not
He's
seen
one of the most racist, misogynistic pieces of shit. But Danny McBride in real life, I know for a fact he's not that, right? But just making that distinction, I feel, is very hard.
It is. That's art. Okay, actually, so on that note, talking about racism and misogyny, I wanted to bring up your experiences in India.